Well, thank you so much for allowing me to join you and to speak to you. I'm really grateful for your kind invitation and for your very kind introduction as well. There's a story, a famous story that's sometimes told of the great scientist and Nobel Prize winner, Albert Einstein. And so the story goes, no one really knows if it's true or not, but so the story goes is that once Einstein was on a train traveling regionally in Europe. And it was quite a long train journey, a few hours. And there was a bellboy who was kind of an assistant on the train. He was very young and he was checking tickets. And he got to Einstein's cabin and he didn't recognize Einstein, didn't know who he was. And so he asked him for his ticket, just like he would any other passenger. And Einstein didn't have it on him. He couldn't find the ticket. He must have lost it. And so he was checking in his jacket. He was looking on the floor. He was looking in his bag and he couldn't find the ticket. Just at that moment, one of the senior supervisors, one of the train conductors, walked past and he grabbed the young intern and threw him to the side and said, "Are you crazy? Do you know who that is? That's Professor Albert Einstein. He just won a Nobel Prize. He's one of the smartest men in the world." And so the intern and the supervisor, the conductor, said to Einstein, "We're so sorry, Professor. It's okay. There's no need for you to find your ticket." A little later, during the same train journey, the young bellboy was walking past again and he saw Albert Einstein once again on his knees looking and searching for this ticket, this lost ticket. And he said to him, "Professor Einstein, it's okay. You don't have to worry. We know who you are. You don't need a ticket. We know who you are." And Einstein smiled and looked at the young man and said, "Young man, you might know who I am, but I don't know where I'm going. That's why I need to find my ticket." It's an amusing story, but it gets to the heart of the existential needs and reality and struggles that we all face. No matter what we believe, no matter how safe we are in our faith, if we are followers of Jesus, if we call ourselves Christian, or if we have drifted from that place, or if we don't know God at all, wherever we are in that journey with God, in that search for God, or even perhaps in our rejection of God, we all want to know who we are and we want to know where we are going. And the pathway to that has been debated and talked about for many, many thousands of years. In fact, the earliest Greek philosophers, people like Plato and Aristotle, they talk about it as starting with a search for truth. And Plato famously said, if you want to find truth, you've just got to follow the evidence to where it leads. But truth is how we find out who we are, and truth is how we find out where we're going. Truth is that which corresponds to reality. We need to first accept that we need to be willing to search for the truth about who we are, the truth about what we need, the truth about our situation. Now, that seems like quite a simple thing. They don't seem like deeply profound truths, but in today's society, for the first time in a long time, we seem to be having another argument about whether or not this thing called truth even exists and what it in fact is. And so the search for who we are and where we're going seems to have gone off the rails for us collectively as a modern industrializing society, but also for each of us as individuals too. Because what we seem to be told by the world is that we can develop our own truths. We can develop our own ideas of what's right and wrong. We can develop our own models of satisfaction, our own models of happiness and pleasure and success. And we can just follow them in the best way we know how to build our best lives for ourselves. What I want to talk to you about today are the deeper needs, the deeper longings that run counter to the post-truth world that we are living in. A post-truth world is basically a world where we are told to think with our feelings. We're told to just do whatever feels right, find out what we want, find out what we desire, and then go after that as best we can. And I want to talk about why that doesn't work. And I want to talk about it in the context of three deeper yearnings of every human heart and every human mind. Three yearnings that we need to get to the bottom of, because following what we want to feel good about in the short term is simply not enough. And then I want to talk in relation to each of these three things about how the message of Jesus Christ, the Christian message, speaks into each of these things. Firstly, the search for truth. Secondly, the search for relationship. And thirdly, the search for hope. The human heart, no matter what we believe, no matter who we are, no matter how old we are, on some level, I want to put it to you that you and I are always searching for and needing truth, relationship, and hope. So let's start with this search for truth. And as I said, the post-truth world tells us that, truth either doesn't exist or it doesn't matter. And both of those things fail. They fail logically and they fail morally. The whole idea, this postmodern idea that truth does not exist, that everyone who makes a truth claim is being exclusive, is being arrogant. To say something is true is a deeply arrogant and exclusive thing. The idea that truth doesn't exist, it fails logically. And we know that very simply because the sentence, truth does not exist, is a truth claim. If anyone ever asks you or says to you, truth doesn't exist, you should simply ask them, was that true? That sentence you just uttered to me, was that sentence true? We know straight away that they have to answer yes or no. If they answer yes, that it was true, they are admitting that truth exists. If they say no, it's not true, then they're admitting that truth exists. So you see, just using the principles of logic, we know that truth exists. And as Plato said, all we have to do to find it is follow the evidence to where it leads. So the idea today that truth does not exist is a failed idea. We do know that truth exists. Truth is that which corresponds to reality. What about this even more dangerous idea, perhaps, that truth doesn't matter? What matters more are your feelings, as I've talked about. Well, saying that truth doesn't exist, we know that that fails logically. Saying that truth doesn't matter and your feelings are what matters most fails morally, because it puts us in the center of our whole world. It gets us thinking inward, thinking just of what we want and what we need. It completely ignores the need for service, for sacrifice, for selflessness, for love, for compassion, for anything outward facing. Now, these two ideas of today's world, that truth doesn't exist and that truth doesn't matter, we see examples of these in the Bible. When Jesus is before Pilate and he's being questioned as part of his show trial, there's a moment, a very powerful moment, where Pilate says, "What is truth?" And then he walks away. He doesn't even wait for the answer. And that is a penetrating and insightful moment given the world in which we now live, because the tone with which Pilate does that, he says, "What is truth?" It's almost like he throws his hands up. He says, "What is truth?" And then he walks away. What he's effectively saying is that we can't know it. Who knows what truth is? It could be anything to anyone. It doesn't even exist, perhaps. He's given up on the concept of truth. Pilate gives up on finding the truth at that point. He says, "What is truth?" And he walks away. That's this idea that truth doesn't exist, the postmodern idea. What about the idea that truth doesn't matter and your feelings matter most? We see this in the Bible, in the incredible story of Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead. So Jesus raises one of his close friends, Lazarus, and this gets around. There are witnesses that see it. There are eyewitnesses. And they tell everyone. And word gets back to the Pharisees, the Jewish leaders who are looking for a way to get at Jesus, to bring him down, to stop him doing what he's doing. They're upset that Jesus is claiming to be the Son of God, that he's claiming to have divine power and authority. And word gets back to them, incontrovertible evidence that Jesus has raised this man Lazarus from the dead. And what do? They don't question the truth of what has happened, because the evidence is incontrovertible. You can't deny that kind of eyewitness evidence that they are getting. They don't question whether or not Jesus raised him from the dead. They don't question whether or not Jesus is who he says he is. What they say is this. They say, if we allow this man to keep doing these things, the Romans are going to come and we are going to lose our temple and our position. We're going to lose our positions. They weren't interested in the truth. They were interested in their feelings, in their position, in their Twitter accounts, in their Instagram feeds, in their followers, in their robes, in their money, in their security that they had. They completely lost sight of what it actually means for them that Jesus is who he says he is, that the Son of God is here in the flesh. They didn't even stop to consider how incredible that would actually be and how wonderful that actually is, the fact that it is good news. No, they were so turned in on themselves that they were more worried about their feelings. So we see how ignoring that truth exists fails logically. We see how trying to put our feelings before truth and put our feelings first fails us morally. So what are we then looking for? We are looking for truth that appeals logically and that satisfies us morally. An objective framework of a truth that shows us right from wrong, but that also has the evidence to back it up. And then we look at the person of Jesus, and what does he say? He doesn't, as in every other worldview, he doesn't point to the truth. He doesn't say this is true, and this is true. He points to himself and he says, I am the truth. I am the way, the truth, and the life. In pointing to himself, Jesus is doing two incredible things. He is confirming that absolute truth does exist, that it is exclusive, it's not arrogant, but it is also evidence-based. And we see the evidence again and again. When Thomas doubts and asks the resurrected Jesus for evidence, Jesus shows him the evidence. He shows his scars. He appears before Thomas. He speaks with him. We see it in 1 Peter 3:15 when we are commanded as followers of Jesus to always be ready to give a reason, a defense for the hope that we have. We see it in the Old Testament where God says, come, let us reason together. What we see here is that this message of Jesus that we Christians believe, yes, it is true, but we don't have to blindly believe it. There is plenty of evidence. So if you have questions, if you have uncertainties, whether you are Christian or not, the evidence is there. The responses are there. The answers are there to your questions. But it's up to you, as Plato said, to follow the evidence to where it leads, with an open mind and an open heart. Not just to follow it while it's convenient and while it's easy, to follow it wherever it leads. I promise you, if you do that, it will lead you to the person of Jesus Christ. I am the truth, the way, and the life, he tells us. No one comes to the Father except through me. The search for truth can only ultimately culminate if we follow the evidence honestly at the feet of the person of Jesus Christ. So in the Christian message, the truth is not just evidence-based, it's also a person. It culminates in a person. It's deeply, deeply personal. It's personally embodied and it's evidence-based. In no other worldview do we see that. So this search for truth is our first step. What about the search for relationship? Now, there was a longitudinal Harvard study, and longitudinal studies basically mean that they follow a group of people around for a long, long time, ideally their entire lives. And this study followed a large number of people around for most of their lives, if not 50, 60, 70 years. And it was trying to ascertain what was the key to success, the key to flourishing, the key to happiness, the key to well-being. Now, the world offers us ideas of what success actually looks like. And it's usually a combination of fame and wealth and financial security and beauty and popularity and reputation and all of these sorts of things. And none of those things are in and of themselves bad things. They're all really good things. But this study interestingly found that there is almost no statistical correlation between those things and ultimate lifelong well-being, success, and flourishing. What is the one thing that they found that actually does account for those things? It was relationships. It's the strength and quality of the relationships that we have with people. That's what the data, the human lived experience tells us about what we are wired for. Now, that's science saying that. Wouldn't you expect, if that was the case, if science found that we were wired more deeply for relationships than for anything else, wouldn't you then expect that if there was one true worldview, one true understanding of reality, of God out there, that it would have something to do with relationship? Once again, we come to the person of Jesus Christ and another conversation that he had, this time with a lawyer. And he's asked, what is the greatest commandment? He's basically asked, what is the meaning of life? What am I supposed to do? And he gives two incredible responses that are deeply, deeply relational. He says, love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul and mind and strength, and go and love your neighbor as yourself. He is asked for the meaning of life. What's the key to success? He's asked. And he says, the key to success are these two categories of relationship. Get these two categories of relationship right. Your relationship with God and your relationship with other people. On those two categories of relationship hang the key to your flourishing, to your success, to God's purpose for you, to the reason for which you were created. Isn't it incredible that a species of people the human race, that we are wired so deeply for relationship. And when God comes into the world as a person, that's exactly what he tells us about ourselves. It's all about relationship. So this Christian message, we know that it's embodied in a person, Jesus Christ. We know that it's underpinned by evidence. And now we also know that it's manifested in and through relationship. The search for truth, the search for relationship. Thirdly and finally then, the search for hope. Now, I don't know about you, I've had a very difficult 6 months. We're always, all of us, dealing with difficulties, with struggles, with suffering. But when we are going through those difficulties, one thing we always do, again, regardless of what we believe, our age, where we live, is that we are always hoping for something better. Even when things are good, we hope for something better. When things are bad, we definitely hope for something better. And hope, defined by the world, is pretty much that. Wanting something better than the way things are right now. And that's a good thing. Now, interestingly, there was a psychologist named Erik Erikson, I think. Yeah, I think it was Erik Erikson. And he came up with 8 stages of psychosocial human development. So these are the 8 stages that he catalogued that all human beings go through if they're going to get to the point of being psychologically, relationally, and mentally healthy. And the first stage happens from the moment you are born until you're around 18 months old to 2 years old. And it's the capacity to trust. The first and most important stage of psychosocial development is growing the capacity to trust. It's one of the reasons why babies are crying, because initially they don't trust that they're going to get what they need. They're screaming out for what they need. Love, food, milk, warmth, shelter, security, human contact. All of these things are the things babies are crying out for. And the degree to which a newborn baby's parents can satisfy those needs directly determines the degree to which that baby will be capable of trusting as they get older. Now, this is really important because Erikson says that only when this ability to trust has been fulfilled do people then have the capacity to hope. Now, that tells us something fascinating. It tells us that in our hearts and minds, trust and hope are inextricably linked. And it makes sense when a baby is crying out for something, and then its parent provides for that again and again and again. What that baby is learning is that its providers, its carers, its parents are trustworthy. And so when the baby is hoping for something better, it actually needs someone trustworthy to provide that something better. Now, in the world, what we are often told in a post-truth culture is we are told to hope for something better and then to go and get it, or to use the resources you've got, use the money you've got, use the education you've got, use this and that and the other in order to fulfill your hopes. You hope for something better, go and get it. The Millennial Mantra, you do you, your best self. The self-improvement, the courses that we go to make ourselves look better, to feel better, to think better. Now, in and of itself, those things aren't necessarily bad. The problem is they all run the risk of misunderstanding the connection between hope and trust. In the world, we very naturally are told to hope for better things, and we very naturally do hope for better things. But we are never told what we are to put our hope in order to get those things. In order to hope for something better, for a better life, for a future without suffering, for better relationships, we first need to find someone or something to hope in. We spend too much time thinking about the objects of our hope and not enough time thinking about the subject of our hope. What is our hope in? What is your hope in? Not what are you hoping for? Everyone is hoping for something, but we don't often enough reflect on what we are hoping in. And in that, the person of Jesus Christ once again speaks right into our hearts and into that need. He says in John 10:10, I have come so that you can have life and have it to the full. And then we are told later in the final book of the Bible, these words from the mouth and the heart of Jesus, here I am, I stand at the door and knock. To anyone who answers and opens up the door, I will come in. Once again, we see relationship, and eat with him and he with me. So we see that Jesus is not just saying to hope for something better. He's saying, hope for something better and put your trust in the meantime in me, and I will get you there. It's well and good to hope for something better, but we need someone to hope in to get us to what we want, to get us to that somewhere better. So this Christian message, this good news of Jesus, this God who came into the world as a person to die for you and for me, to take all of our shame and our guilt and our needs, acknowledging through that our need for truth, our need for hope, our need for something better, our need for liberation from the things we struggle with, our need for relationship. He takes all of our brokenness and all of our needs. He goes to the cross and pays the price for our brokenness and imperfection. And through that, now invites you and me into relationship with him. And through that relationship, through that communion with him, that fellowship with him, that life that he wants us to share with him and put him in charge of, he gives us the three deepest longings of the human heart. He gives us truth embodied in himself, Jesus Christ, the truth, the way, the truth, and the life. He gives us relationship with God himself through Jesus Christ, up close and personal, intimate relationship with God, thereby equipping us and propelling us into loving relationships with those around us. And he gives us not just something to hope for, an eternal future where there will be no more suffering, where there will be ultimate and perfect flourishing and fulfillment, but also he gives us comfort and strength and something to hope in and trust in while we are still going through the struggles that this world inevitably brings. The search for hope, the search for truth, and the search for relationship, all three culminate and are satisfied in and through the person of Jesus Christ, and are made real for you and me in and through the cross of Jesus Christ. A God himself who came into the world for you so you could go to be with him. A God himself that the eternal became immanent so that we as immanent broken beings can become eternal. A God himself, perfection, who allowed himself to be beaten and bruised and hurt and tortured so that we who are worthy of that torture, worthy of that punishment, wouldn't have to suffer it. Mark Twain famously said that the two most important days in a person's life are the day you were born and the day you find out why. And he was onto something because he was linking their flourishing with purpose. Now, this Christian message, what it tells us is that our purpose, the reason for which we were made, is to be in loving relationship with God and to be in loving relationship with each other. And the second one doesn't even work properly if we don't get the first one right first. And so I want to ask you today, as you're sitting and watching this, wherever you are with God, if you haven't made that decision before, to encourage you and invite you to make that decision, to invite Jesus Christ into your life and put him in charge of your life. For those of you who have already made that decision, I invite you and encourage you to reaffirm that decision. Reaffirm it. And whoever you are and wherever we go from here, to go with Jesus in our hearts. The way, the truth, and the life. Ultimate truth made real as a person. Ultimate hope made trustworthy in human form. And ultimate relationship with God himself in this life and the next. Thanks again for listening. God bless you all.